My wife says it's best to actually mute me. She does it all the time. So I'm going to self-mute myself and hand over to you ladies to pick it up.
Yeah, thank you so much to the entire team. We have such a nice, I see we have about 80 participants today. Thank you so much for joining us for the first of our POPI sessions. I'm going to hand over to Melanie, who will do the formal introduction. And as and how people arrive, I'll just admit them. I suppose if everybody can just keep themselves muted and just unmute, we'll leave questions for later, and obviously all questions can go into the chat box. Melanie, over to you. I think without further ado, thank you so much.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much, Vanessa. On behalf of Anastasia and Richard and Armand and just STBB generally, thank you. Thank you very much for the invitation for us to present or to do a series of presentations on POPI and the privacy policies and clients' information, and how you will be expected to deal with things and when and how. So yeah, it's a great honor, Barry. Thank you very much. What we've decided, Vanessa and I had a chat earlier today, what we've decided in order to keep things fresh and to keep things exciting, as exciting as POPI can be, we will be doing the full presentation course over 3 sessions, today being session number 1. And we have decided not to allow for a month or more in between the sessions, because otherwise people, forget the contents of the previous session. So what we've decided to do is to space the 3 sessions over a 2-week or with a 2-week interval in between. So the next session after today, which will be a very interesting session and a very practical session, and I'll tell you about session 2's content in a little while, is on the 3rd of September, Thursday afternoon, similar to today's session between 2 and 3. If that suits everybody, it's good to know that you can diarize the date in advance. And then the 3rd and final session, a planned session is and will be hosted between 2 and 3 on the 17th of September, which is also a Thursday. And hopefully we will be able to cover the entire spectrum of the provisions contained in the POPI Act within the 3 sessions. If not, don't panic, because we do have enough time to maybe perhaps, if we need to, do a 4th session or as many sessions as you need after the 3rd session. But, I'm training quite a lot on POPI. I've been asked to train many agencies and businesses, because it affects other businesses other than real estate as well, and we should be okay with the 3 sessions. So I encourage all of you to diarize session number 2 and session number 3 so that you're available. It only really makes sense as a whole if you've attended all the sessions, because I obviously will be dealing with certain aspects in today's session and practical aspects in session 2. And then in session 3, I'm hoping to have a policy available so that we can actually look at what a privacy policy will look like. Session number 2, which is on the 3rd of September, I will be showing you examples of privacy policy or client privacy policy prompts, which I've picked up in my general dealings as an individual, trying to book a flight online or through an app, and the marketing prompts which come up. So I'd like to show you what big multinational companies are doing, like Microsoft and Apple and MTN and Vodacom, in as far as those massive client databases are concerned, because it will give you a nice idea of what it is that you will need to do as well. So that will be session number 2. And in session number 2, I will be dealing also with the suggested changes, which we think we will be seeing in real estate documentation, all the additional declarations and opt-out and direct marketing consents that we would like to start seeing incorporated in real estate documentation. So session 2 is really a nice practical session. I would encourage all of you to attend session 2 as well. Okay, so now, now that we have established the program, let me just run through the objectives of the 3-session course so that at the end of our 3rd session, if we do need to arrange a 4th session, if we don't have enough time to get through all these objectives, that, you know, we have a measure, that we can go back to the objectives that we wish and that we want to achieve, and that we can check that we've achieved all the objectives. So the first objective with our 3-session course on POPI is to fully, or for you guys in the real estate industry and for you guys in your brand, in Chaz Everett, to fully understand the POPI Act framework of obligations applicable to you in the real estate industry, and the due dates, the dates by which you need to be fully compliant. So it's important that we have a general framework that is now contained in the POPI Act, and I want you to understand that and also the due dates. The second objective is for you to fully understand the definition of personal information in terms of POPI and its ensuing obligations. So it's important that we always remind ourselves of what the definition of personal information is, because in as far as your activities are concerned as a real estate practitioner, not every bit of information that you collect and process needs to follow certain rules, and not every bit of information you need and require your client's consent. And that this will become more apparent to you as we move along through the session. So when I go, which will be today, through the definition of what is personal information and as far as POPI is concerned, then you must always remind yourself as we go along about and in respect of this definition. The third objective with our 3-session course is to analyze from where and how your business collect clients' information at the moment. We've got to go and do a bit of an analysis of the way in which you collect, how you collect, and where you get the information from. The fourth objective is to determine what you actually do with the information at the moment, currently. So that will also be covered in today's session. The fifth objective is to understand why clients' information is collected. You've got to have a reason. We don't just blindly ask clients for their marital status confirmation. We need to know why are we asking the clients to confirm their marital status with a copy of the marriage certificate. Why are we asking clients for copies of their income tax numbers? We need to understand why we are collecting clients' information. Then we will also review current privacy policies and practices. So what is generally done out in the market in as far as you know, the client's information is concerned. What is it that we do? Where do we buy our client contact lists? Do we actually even check that clients have given permission to buy those contact lists? So we'll look at existing privacy policies and existing privacy client information practices. The seventh objective is to understand the amendments needed in respect of your standard documentation and what this actually entails. Session 2 will deal with this. Very interesting. Objective number 8 is to understand your direct marketing requirements, which obviously is quite a big issue in the real estate industry, because a lot of your activities involve canvassing and involves direct marketing, either by email or by telephone. So I want you all to understand the issues surrounding direct marketing in terms of POPI and what the requirements are going forward. And then lastly, obviously, not lastly, second lastly, is to adopt a new privacy policy within your businesses, whether it's branches of your head office or whether you're a franchised office. You do need to have a proper privacy policy in place after all of this has been covered, which will include IT security, and we've got to look at that, devices security, and just general behavior surrounding devices like your tablet and your cell phone and receiving details on your tablet and your cell phone and your laptop. Your privacy policy will also now make specific provision for the processing of information. When may you process? How do you process? What do you process? How you store information. There will be a new policy and practices surrounding the storage of information. usage of information for future purposes, appointment of an information officer, and duties. And then lastly, I'll make a few minutes available to talk about the POPI manual. Don't stress about that acronym right now, but right at the end of our third session, I'll explain to you what POPI means. You'll start hearing about it a little bit more regularly now, and you do need to know what it is, what it means, as opposed to POPI. So we have all these interesting acronyms, POPI and POPI. Being Afrikaans, obviously, and doing POPI training is actually quite interesting. So people remember me as the POPI who's training on POPI, and you're more than welcome to remember me as the POPI. And then I also want to run through the GDPR and how that relates to POPI. Sorry. So this is the scope, the basic outline of the content. It's actually very interesting. You know, South Africa has lagged behind the rest of the world in as far as proper legislation is concerned regarding clients' information and, you know, us supplying our information as consumers, and which is required everywhere we go, whether we have a cell phone contract and we need to renew it, whether we sign up with MultiChoice, Netflix, if we download Take-A-Lot, if we download any type of app, if we do anything in life, we supply our personal information. And so do our clients in reverse, supply their personal information to you and to me. And quite frankly, up until now, South Africa's legislation has been very loose, and it hasn't really given consumers and service providers like us guidance on what may be done with that information, what may not be done with that information. So it really is important that we understand what we may do with clients' information and what we may not do with clients' information. Because if we fall short of the POPI standards and requirements, then there will be, or there's a possibility of reputational damage or reputational consequences. We don't, as a brand, and I'm sure you would agree, we definitely don't want our clients to feel that the information is not safe and that it is, you know, shared without their permission. And, you know, we want our clients to feel secure in doing business with us. And part of that security emanates from your privacy policies and your client's protection umbrella in as far as their very private information is concerned that you and I collect and process during the course of our property transactions. So in today's session, I will be dealing with when was the POPI promulgated, what is personal information, how do you currently collect it, why is it being collected, what do you do with it, what should you start thinking about going forward, and I'm going to give you some homework for session number 2, which will be right at the end of today. Sorry, so a lot of people were caught unaware, or they were caught off guard, including ourselves, when our President Ramaphosa announced the commencement of the entire POPI Act on the 22nd of June this year. I mean, at the height of the biggest possible pandemic that the world has been going through in the last 100 years. Our president decides that an act which was published in 2013 for the first time, 7 years ago, needs to be pushed through Parliament now. So we were all caught a little bit unaware, and I don't want you guys to panic about your direct marketing and canvassing practices which you are currently doing. You don't need to change anything immediately. We do have an opportunity until the 1st of July 2021 to get our processes in place, to get our policies in place, to insert the necessary changes to our standard documentation, to have opt-outs, to get consents, marketing consents. We've got a lot of time. We've got exactly 10 months left until the due date when we have to have everything in order, or all our ducks in a row. So everything that I'll be covering with you and all the changes and the requirements in the next 3 sessions will have practical application to your businesses, but you don't need to go and implement things I'm saying or I'm suggesting immediately, like by the 1st of September. You've got time until the 1st of July 2021. Get all these changes done. The reason why it's taken 7 years for the POPI Act to finally become promulgated in its entirety. It's taken that long for the government to set up and properly set up the information regulator. So the information regulator is now being set up and established in terms of the POPI Act, and that's set up and established on the 1st of July this year. And the information regulator will be like the tribunal, you know, the rental tribunal and the consumer tribunals, which will control the standards of, you know, the privacy policies and the privacy code of conduct for different industries in South Africa, and also be the place to which you and I as consumers will turn if you and I wish to complain about MTN, Vodacom, Sanlam, Discovery, whoever else phones us incessantly, despite us having asked them to remove our details from their systems. At the moment, there's nowhere for consumers to complain. If consumers are unhappy with unsolicited direct marketing phone calls or emails, despite having asked the supplier to remove the details, if details are not removed by the bank or by the insurance company who incessantly continues to phone you, there's nowhere where we can go at the moment. As of from the 1st of July 2021, us as consumers can go and complain at the information regulator if our details are not removed from databases in terms of unsolicited marketing. But I want you to remember that equally on the flip side of that coin, as much as you and I as consumers in South Africa are entitled to lodge complaints ourselves if we are not happy with our data being shared and our data being compromised, our clients have that same right. So our clients can also complain at the information regulator if they feel that their personal information that you've collected are not being dealt with confidentially, and that you're sharing information, it's not secure, you're not dealing with it, you're not getting consent. So this is what the information regulator will be doing. In terms of the POPI Act, these are the 5 pillars of privacy compliance in South Africa. These 5 pillars, compliance pillars, are compliant or in line with the international standards. So all the privacy compliance standards which exist in the 50 American states, as well as all the European countries with which South Africa does trade and exchanges and business, have these 5 pillars in their legislation. So it's about time that South African privacy legislation got in line with international standards. What are these 5 pillars? Well, pillar number 1 is that finally the conditions in terms of which you and I and all other businesses process personal information are now set out specifically in the Act. So we have a nice framework as business suppliers, as service suppliers, in terms of which we are lawfully entitled to process clients' personal information, and that is contained in the POPI Act. So finally, we know now exactly under which conditions we may lawfully process clients' personal information. The second pillar of the privacy compliance standards in South Africa, which is found in POPI and the POPI Act, is the regulation of processing of special personal information is finally defined. I'm going to show you in a minute what the difference is between normal personal information and special personal information. Because special personal information must be defined, which now it is, and it must be dealt with in the uttermost confidence. And there are now specific rules and principles which govern your and my processing of our clients' special personal information. So remember the differentiation when we get to definitions between normal personal information and special personal information. The third pillar, which is important, is that, as I said before, information regulator, which has now been set up by government, in terms of the POPI Act. And it was set up on the 1st of July this year, and the operations will start on the 1st of July next year, may, on request from an industry, motor vehicle industry, the commodities industry, the mining industry, any of the industries. Our industry is obviously the business and financial sector, real estate. A code of conduct may be issued by the information regulator. There is no suggested code of conduct suggested either by the EAAB or any other regulatory body in the real estate industry. So what we share with you in the next 3 sessions will be what we have seen in the Act and what we think will apply to your industry. So once and if there is a real estate privacy code of conduct issued, then of course we will refresh all the information and the changes in line with the code of conduct. But it's nice to know that there can be a code of conduct issued specifically for real estate in as far as privacy compliance is concerned. The third pillar involves the procedure for dealing with complaints. There's never been, as I said before, anywhere for us as consumers to turn if we were unhappy, other than blocking on Truecaller these silly phone calls from whichever credit card company or insurance company. I mean, today, for some other reason, I had about 7 phone calls from some company, which blocked the number, so the actual screen lights up red on my cell phone. But lo and behold, they keep phoning, and I would like to actually report that company somewhere. Now I can. So from the 1st of July next year, we as consumers can complain if our details are shared without our consent. But remember, your clients can also complain. So we need to make sure that we get our things in order by July next year in order to avoid these complaints, which could lead to penalties and fines and reputational damage. And then lastly, the only act in South Africa or piece of legislation in South Africa which prior to POPI dealt with direct marketing and what the rules are surrounding direct marketing was the Consumer Protection Act that you all had such extensive training on 10 years ago. It's actually promulgated in 2010. Can you believe it's 10 years ago? But it is insufficient. So direct marketing, in as far as clients' information is concerned, and people being able to just buy these contact lists from big suppliers who sell these contact lists at a huge price, is unacceptable and is unregulated, even in terms of the Consumer Protection Act provisions. So now, with POPI and the POPI Act, there are very specific rules which govern you and I using clients' information, contact numbers, email addresses for canvassing or any form of direct marketing, electronic direct marketing, and that now is set out in POPI. So, in as far as all the confusion that has been created with the rules in POPI regarding direct marketing, at least there are rules now. So whereas before there were no rules, so people were just doing what they would like. They would buy contact lists from CMA or Lightstone, and without any regard to the particular person's details on that contact list, people would just phone. You would appoint your canvasser, or you yourself would canvass, and just phone one after the other without any regard in respect of the client's wishes, or so there weren't really any rules regarding that scenario before POPI and before the POPI Act. So these are the 5 pillars that really supports the foundation of the detail that I'm going to go through with you now. So let's look at the definition of personal information as contained in the POPI Act. You need to look at this with me because a lot of the information which you guys utilize in order to draw statistics, and you draw statistics from property databases in order for you to do a proper valuation of a property. A lot of the information you draw from the databases to do valuations are not personal information, which means that you generally do not need anyone's permission to draw information from CMA or PropStats or Lightstone or any of the databases that you use in order to do a valuation. So, but if you declare any of the information in this definition, you need the client's consent. So let's look at what is defined as personal information and what isn't. So personal information means information relating to an identifiable living natural person or a juristic person, and includes but is not limited to. Subsection A contains the part of the definition which relates to special personal information. So information relating to the race, the gender, the sex, the pregnancy, marital status, nationality, ethnicity, social origin, color, sexual orientation, age, physical or mental health, well-being, disability, religion, conscience, belief, culture, language, and birth of the person. That is all special personal information. And you may not collect, process, or use special personal information, which is the information contained in this subsection A, without that person's particular and specific consent being obtained. So isn't that interesting? And I mean, there's lots of you know, the information that you and I collect on a daily basis, which is required, that falls within the definition of special personal information. Age, someone's age. We get the ID number, so, and we know their age. At the moment, with our COVID risk assessment forms, which we collect, you and I both, before we meet with clients, we even ask them about their physical well-being. That's special personal information. We ask language, that's special personal information. We ask marital status, that's special personal information. So there is a great degree of information that you and I collect, process, store, and use for future purposes, for which we need the client's specific permission. So subsection B, personal information also includes information relating to education or medical, financial, criminal, or employment history of the person. It's just normal personal information. Any identifying number, which of course is your client's ID number, physical address, email address, telephone number, location, online identifier, or other particular assignment to the person, that's personal information. Biometric information, that's personal information. Personal opinions, views, or preferences of the person, that's quite important to take note of. That's also seen as personal information. Look at this one, F, subsection F. Correspondence sent by the person that is implicitly or explicitly of a private or confidential nature. That's also seen as personal information. So you guys must take note. All the information that you're collecting on your information sheets, together with emails from and to the client, together with WhatsApps and SMSs, are all bandied under the umbrella of personal information definition. Views or opinion of an individual about the person, the name of the person if it appears with other personal information relating to that person, or if the disclosure of that name itself would reveal information about the person. This is the definition of personal information. And remember this definition when we proceed in the sessions. The next thing, now that we know what is actually covered in the scope of personal information and what you need to identify in your privacy policy and for security purposes and in terms of emails and all of that, your information sheets and what you may or may not do, when you need consent to do what with it. Now you know what personal information means. Let's kind of have a look to see how you are collecting your client's personal information. Because there are various ways in which real estate agencies and agents collect clients' personal information. You obviously have prospective buyers complete viewing registers, either online or they do it physically. If you are doing show houses now, having dropped out to alert level 2, if you are starting to arrange show houses, you normally would have purchasers viewing register. So you are collecting details of prospective buyers in this way. Sellers complete the information sheet attached to the mandates. That's another way that you're collecting personal information, sometimes special personal information like marital status. Purchasers complete information sheets when they make an offer that's attached to the offer to purchase. You also collect clients' information from deeds office databases. You collect information from council's databases. You all have access probably to like Lightstone, PropStats, and the like. There are many of those property databases. And you might even have your own internal centralized client database where you go and collect information. You also sometimes ask your attorney for details, and you also use social media like Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn possibly to collect personal and sometimes special personal information about your clients. So you see that there are many ways in which you collect clients' information, and you need to now start thinking about each and every of those ways. Your buyer's viewing register needs to be amended, and you need to now insert certain things in that register. Explain to the client and the prospective buyer why you're asking his email address, what you're going to do with his email address, get his consent on that register, which we're not doing at the moment. And all the means and ways in which we collect information needs to be amended, reviewed and amended. Once we've collected the information, what is it that you guys in the real estate agencies do with the information? Well, first, let's have a look, before we look at what you do, let's look at the information you collect, either via viewing register, an information sheet, a seller's mandate, buyer's offer, deeds office, council, property databases, deeds office, and attorneys. You're collecting at the moment name and surname. You're collecting ID number. You're collecting telephone number, email address, property description, marital status, antenuptial details, income tax numbers, bond account numbers, property value, size, amenities for marketing purposes, monthly rates payment and arrears if any, bond over property. So from a seller's side, we ask the seller for the bond account number. I mean, there's a variety of information that we collect. This is just, a nice summary of the basics. Then we email our clients, or they email us with copies of the ID. They email us with copies of a marriage certificate and antenuptial, with a copy of a SARS document, with a copy of the bond account statement of the bank that holds the bond over the property. So emails to and from clients with PDF copies of documents. Remember, emails containing personal information is also seen as personal information in terms of the Act. And then for your emails and your embedded signatures and your embedded hyperlinks must also change now. And most of us use WhatsApp quite a lot because it's a direct access to our clients. It's much quicker than an email where you've got to open an email address. So these days, I see more and more clients communicate with us as attorneys on WhatsApp, where they take screenshots or take pictures of their ID books and they WhatsApp it to us. So you must remember that if this is the way in which you also communicate personal information with your clients or they with you, that you need to make a mental note at this point that your WhatsApp structures must also start changing. You may also need to insert, a new line or new wording in your WhatsApps, because that's your personal device, but you are utilizing and collecting and sharing through WhatsApp and email your clients' personal information, if not special personal information, and you need their consent to do so. So let me explain to you what the stars mean. So I thought I'd just mark the special personal information for you with a red star, and also the means in which special personal information are collected and shared. So name and surname, in terms of the definition, as you know, and as you can see, falls within the category A, or the subsection A here on the definition. So that red star next to name and surname is special personal information. ID number is not, this is normal personal information. So marital status, antenuptial again is special personal information in terms of this definition. I want to show you that you need to classify the type of information that you collect with every buyer and every seller into the two categories: normal personal information and special personal information, because you need special permission from your client once he's completed his name and surname, which is special personal information, to load it onto your system or to email it to your admin girl or lady or assistant to load it onto your software. So it's important that you draw the definition split between special personal information, for which you need specific consent from your client to process, keep, use, and share, as opposed to normal personal information, for which you don't necessarily need specific consent from the client to load and to use and to share. So once you have collected the information, I think you also need to realize that there are obviously specific reasons why you collect the information. Have you ever considered your information sheet? You know, the sheet that you get your seller to complete when you're busy signing up a mandate. Why do we ask certain questions in that sheet? Is it just because it's always been asked, so we just keep asking? Or do we need to get the information from our client, our seller, and our buyer for a specific reason? And of course, most of the information that we collect and verify is done so in terms of legislation or in terms of a legislative obligation. The biggest legislative obligation is created and applies to us in terms of the Financial Intelligence Centres Act. You and I are both seen as accountable institutions and reportable institutions. And as a result, you and I must both not only identify the client and verify the client's identity, but we must also identify the funds in the transaction and verify the funds in the transaction. So a lot of the information in your information sheets are collected as a result of the obligation on us placed there by FICA or the FIC. But we also get a lot of the information because our Deeds Registry Act requires it. We need to see what the client's marital status is, and we need him to declare that marital status on the information sheet and then send us a copy of the marriage certificate to verify the information. And then SARS. So the Financial Intelligence Centres Act, the Deeds Registry Act, and our income tax legislation and our Transfer Duty Act are just three quick examples of lawful collection of information in terms of an obligation that's placed on us by other government authorities. So as much as there are different reasons why we need to collect different pieces of information, if we are collecting information in terms of the FICA or Deeds Registry Act, we need to tell our client that now, which at the moment we don't do. So once we've collected the information, which we have to collect the information in terms of FICA, Deeds Registry Act, National Credit Act, Consumer Protection Act, whatever the acts are, that governs our collection of information, what is it that you and I do with that information currently? Currently, once we've got the information sheet and the client has emailed us the ID and the marriage certificate and the antenuptial, for instance, we upload it onto our internal databases. So someone actually types the information and might scan, the copy of the ID onto your own Chaz Everett internal database. You also keep physical copies in a physical file. You upload, most probably, the information onto external databases like Property 24, private property, if it is a mandate and it's a seller's information, or for instance, your own Chaz Everett external shared database. There's a possibility of that. You share the information with the conveyancers. Have you ever stopped and given it thought that maybe the client needs to know that you're sharing information with the attorneys, why you're sharing it, and what you are sharing? Well, at the moment, we don't even think about it. And our poor clients are none the wiser. They find out we've got copies of their marriage certificate And sometimes they're quite upset that we've seen that or that we've seen their bank statement. So that is what we are currently doing. We are just simply sending things on email to our returns. We also send copies of documents on email to our mortgage originators or bankers. Have we ever stopped to consider the fact that our clients may not even know what we are sending to our banks and our mortgage originators, and that perhaps they may need to know what information is being shared? We're not doing it at the moment. And then, of course, I mentioned devices earlier. It is absolutely standard practice for you and for me, both of us, all businesses, all business people, to use cell phones to receive work emails. I think most of us have that function activated, and that's very interesting if you start thinking about your privacy policy and the security of your client's information that gets sent by the client on email to your Chaz Everett email address or to my STBB email address, but I'm able to use my private device to access copies of that ID. So how do I protect my client's identification document on an email addressed to STBB if I'm opening it on an Android, where none of the information you ever open or store on an Android is secure or confidential? It all goes into a cloud with in Android's instance with Microsoft. And if you have an Apple telephone, obviously it gets stored with Apple. You know, the other main cell phone supplier, which is Hawaii, is very controversial because it's very difficult to establish where the information goes. Your client's copy of ID on an Huawei phone, where does it go? We know with Outlook where it goes, and we know with Apple where it goes, and that is why that brand of Android phone is banned in certain countries, because there is no security applicable, and none of the information which you store on your Huawei is confidential. So that's just by the by, and it's very interesting to consider our business practices that have evolved so much. We don't sit at desks in the office with a PC any longer, which belongs to the office. We use our cell phones and we use our tablets. Now we do need to start thinking about whether we delete emails with copies of IDs and with copies of income tax details, bank details, if we're receiving our emails on our cell phones. Or does it just go somewhere on the cell phone or with Microsoft? Does our client know this? Do we need to consider how to delete and how to store? So it's interesting. But this is just a nice summary of what it is that you and I do with the client's information once we've collected it, and if we collected it for the right reasons, which normally is in terms of PICA, Heath Registry Act, NCA. So far so good in our analysis. So now we know how we collect information, all these different avenues. We know why we're collecting information, because we're obliged to do it in terms of laws, other laws. So it's lawful for us to collect information. We can't not collect the information. We have to collect the information. Once we've collected it, what do we do with the information? Okay, now we need to be able to answer these questions when we analyze our businesses. So you'll go back to your offices and obviously also start looking at how do you collect the information? Why do you collect the information? When do you collect the information? What do you do with the information once you've collected it? So do you yourselves even know how we are collecting the information? Obviously, as I said, you must do a list. You must actually sit down and start listing the ways in which clients are sending information to you. Do we ourselves know how we input the data into our system? Do we understand how the devices operate in terms of receiving information from clients and the confidentiality and security of that? So we need to understand how putting some details into a WhatsApp and sending it to a client or them sending it to us, you know, how we are putting that onto a system. Is it on the Chaz Everett system? Is it on the Microsoft system? Is it in the cloud? Where is it? Do we ourselves understand how we search their details for verification, how we share the information with the conveyancers and MOs. We email. At the moment, all of us are communicating offers, information sheets, copies of special personal information by email with PDF attachments. Do we ever go back and delete those emails, or do we just leave it there for 5 years or 10 years or whenever? We need to actually think about the way we're sharing the information, and our clients are sharing it with us. And the risk in that, client emailing us a PDF and we then just forwarding that PDF to the attorney. There's a risk in that, and we need to know ourselves how we are sharing this and how we are sharing the information with the property databases. I mean, I often wonder how real estate agents get information onto Property 24 and what Property 24 then does with that information. If you guys as the real estate agents do not really understand that, then you're not really going to understand what Property 24's obligations towards you and your clients will be. So when you're dealing with external property databases and service suppliers like Property 24 and private property, PropStats, Lightstone, you do need to understand how you're sharing your clients' information with that database. Do you yourselves know why you're collecting info? Why are you inputting it? Why are you searching the details? Why are you sharing it with the outside databases? Why are you sharing it with your conveyancers? Do you actually need to share all that information with us and the MOs? You need to answer these questions for yourselves. And then more importantly, as part of the gap analysis or the analysis you've got, the review you guys have to do before session 2. And you look at these questions. Do we ask our clients permission to collect their data? Or do we just assume that they agree tacitly, just by emailing us things? Do we assume they've agreed to it? Do we ask our clients permission to actually load their details onto our system? Do we have their permission to keep their details on our devices if it is shared with Microsoft as a rule on Android? Do we get our clients permission to search their details at all these databases, property databases like Lightstone, Deeds Office, Council? We need their permission. We don't ask. We assume they accept. Do we get their permission to share the information with the conveyancers and the MOs? No. I don't think any agency has a specific and a set out consent or a permission clause for sellers and buyers to sign where it says we will be sharing your information with the conveyancers. This is what we'll be sharing. This is the reason why we'll be sharing, and we'll be sharing it on email or on WhatsApp or on an app or whatever, however you share. You need to get the client's permission. I think the answer to all the questions so far is no, no, no. Interesting. Do we get our clients permission to actually keep their records and not destroy, or get their permission on when they would like us to destroy it? No. You and I just keep the information. In fact, let's not kid ourselves. Client databases are an incredibly valuable commodity in the real estate industry, because it's difficult for us to always find the right buyer for the right property. So we have databases of clients that we have previously worked with, and we just keep their details. And then we might ask them, can we send you a news flash? Can we send you a newsletter? Maybe we don't even ask them at the moment. But I don't think any of us really ask them any of the questions or their permission in the first circle to the left. And then in addition to asking their permission, it is equally important for us to explain to them why we are asking their permission. Do we need to explain to them why we're collecting their details, their data? We need to explain to them why we're putting it into our systems, why we're sharing it, why we're looking up their details at the Deeds Office, why we are sharing the information with the MOs. And, we need to explain to them why we're keeping their records, how long we will keep it, and when we will destroy it. So I hope this basic gap analysis on these 2 slides and the questions that you should ask yourself and that you should ask of your clients will give you a narrower idea of where we are heading towards. We are going to have to start building into our emails into our WhatsApps, into our questionnaires, our information sheets, our contracts, our mandates, explanations of why we are asking for information. We are going to tell them in those documents and means of communication what we will do with the documents, how long we will store it, and we must get their permission to do so. So if you're not able to really answer these questions affirmatively, which I suspect will be the case, because I don't really think that we're asking permission of our clients, and in fact, I know we're not, because we see the instructions. That's the tweak, that's the change that we're going to see in the real estate industry. I'm not going to deal fully with direct marketing today, because it actually is the first portion of our session 2, but I would like you to think about Section 66 of the POPI Act, which determines that a private or public body, in other words, you're a private body, I'm a private body, so both Chaz, Everett, and STBB, that already has personal details of an individual, whether it's an existing client from 2 years ago, or whether it's a client's details that we bought from Lightstone. You and I may not use the information to send direct electronic marketing to that person. Note the qualification of electronic. So if you knock on doors, that's still acceptable, and POPI does not apply to knocking on door marketing. But it's if you phone, if you WhatsApp, if you SMS, and if you email. So these MailChimp emails that we send out, we're not allowed to unless the individual has given his or her consent. So this is what has got the real estate industry up in arms, because such a big part of your business is spent canvassing. You know, it's an integral part. You can't stop doing that now. But if the POPI Act says that you're not allowed to phone someone unless you've got that person's permission to phone them, it's like a catch-22 situation. You can't get their permission because you're not allowed to phone them. So I'd like to challenge you guys and give you a little bit of homework for session 2. I'd like you to think about this prohibition or this restriction and the catch-22 situation that we are seemingly finding ourselves in. We're not allowed to use the details unless we've got the consent, but how can we get the consent if we're not allowed to use the details? It's a problem, and that is what's got the real estate industry up in arms. But there is a solution, and I'm going to share the solution with you at the next session. I'm going to give you scripts, and I'm going to give you the actual documents and the suggestion on what to do and how to email the wording. But I do want you to think about it. What do you think the solution would be? Is it to stop canvassing? No, it's not. So this is the restriction which is contained in the POPI Act. When you start thinking about a solution, I want you to think about who you are marketing to or you canvassing. Existing clients that you've dealt with before. And new clients that you've never dealt with before. And then remember think about how are you marketing? Are you doing it by email, by telephone, by SMS, or by doing physical drops? Okay? And you need to consider these things when you think of a solution around this restriction contained in Section 66. I want to introduce this for you and with you so that we have a nice platform to kick off with at the second session. So the homework that I need you to do for session 2 is not only to try and think about ways in which you may continue to canvass and market it directly, considering the need and requirements of obtain consent first. It's not only that, but I also want you to make a list of all and any agency documentation which is completed by your client. So an information sheet, I don't know what you've got. It's normally an information sheet, a buyer's register. So make a list of that, and which may contain information from the client and not obtained from the client, like buying contact lists from CMA or Lightstone. Make a list of that. And then take your time and try and identify what needs to be inserted into the agency documentation and emails and WhatsApps. If you take into account the answers to the questions that I've asked you. You obviously need to get your client's permission to do these things, and you've obviously got to explain to your client why we're doing those things. So that gives you a good idea of what I think, you know, will be the answer in your homework for session 2. So that's what you do next. And then we will see you at session 2, which is really, really interesting, and it's very practical, and I'll show you lots of examples of Microsoft privacy prompts on your cell phone, etc., etc. And I hope to see all of you then at the next session, which is at 2 o'clock sharp on Thursday, the 3rd of September. So I'll take some questions now. I'll have a look
questions
quickly
in the in the chat box.
Okay, I hope that was practical, and that it makes sense, and that it's starting to give you an idea of what we're doing. We will obviously share the PowerPoint presentation with all of you. I know that Vanessa is recording the information, the session, and so at the end there will be at least 3 PowerPoints with everything you need and 3 presentation recordings, and we'll do that afterwards. So Vanessa Milani will deal with all questions. Okay, let's see. So Chrissy LaRue, you have a question. Do we need written permission from the client? Yes, you do. But we are not going to have an additional document, which obviously with 7,000 documents that we need to get signed as a real estate agent and as an attorney for that matter, we are going to build into your existing documents the consent and the permission prompts. You'll see the examples next week. How we're not going to sneak it in, but we're not going to add another page, another consent form. We're going to insert the necessary consent and permission prompt for the seller and the buyer, especially on direct marketing and what you may use the information for, why you're getting it, you know, everything that we've now gone through today. We're going to put that into your standard documentation, and next week I'm going to show you how we do that. So yes, you do need your client's written permission. Wayne's question, would client testimonials also require consent? Client testimonials. Oh, in terms of you receiving a very positive testimonial from a client that's been exceptionally happy with your service, and you then sharing that in order to market yourself. I think that was your question. You would need to get the permission because your client's name and surname appears on that testimonial. So, and that's personal information for which you need consent. So you can't share that testimonial if your client's name and surname appears on that testimonial. And I mean, a testimonial is actually worthless unless the name appears on it. So of course you've got a good relationship with that client, and we will help you, you know, to have a standard email, you know, compliant with POPI, that you will send and respond to the testimonial in which you ask your client, is it in order for me to share this with your first name? We won't put your surname and your ID number, for instance. And if your client specifically agrees, then of course that is specific consent. So yes, you can't send testimonials on with name and surname without getting that person's permission. Okay, the next question is from Andre Mars. Who is the responsible person, the agency or the agent? Agents aren't employees, they are private contractors. Well, actually, agents are called independent contractors. So not private contractors, but it's, I think you and I are on the same page when it comes to, you know, the responsibility. So your question is, must an agent go and do the homework that I've set today and that will be set at the end of session 2 for session 3 individually? Of course, the reason why you as a real estate agent and why you have associated yourself with a national brand such as Chas Everett is because there are a lot of benefits of an association such as this. Otherwise, you would have gone on your own as a sole proprietor. So you obviously made a choice, a concerted choice, an educated choice to join a brand such as Chas Everett that comes with its massive benefits, but also its obligations. So there obviously is an independent contractors agreement that you have signed as an independent contractor with Chas Everett, and as a result you will be subject to the Chas Everett privacy policy requirements. So we will work if Chaz Everett allows us to, or you know, guide you guys or give you some templates. We will work out a you know, a policy, and we will help you with that policy. And once the changes are made from a head office perspective, each of the branches and franchises will need to do training to all the agents and independent contractors and admin staff for that matter, and all of you will be subject to the head office changes. So you do need to comply with the Chaz Everett privacy policy. Wayne had another question. Do we not get one soft means of communication by phone call? I'm not going to give you the answer to that right now, because we are going to go into a lot of detail regarding the soft approach and the direct marketing, and what you can do in terms of a phone call, considering the restriction contained in section 66. So I'd like you to do a bit of thinking about this soft phone call or soft allowance. Isn't there one phone call allowed? That's actually what you're asking me. And I'll give you the definitive answer next time. It's a discussion on its own, and I have examples of things that you need to consider and take into account when you do make those phone calls. My short answer to that question, just to reassure all of you, is that you are not going to stop making cold calls. You are going to continue doing cold calls, but there will be rules related to those cold calls, and certain things that you need to say now, and certain things you need to do. So tune in next time, Wayne, so that I can show you exactly how to deal with your cold calls and your soft calls. But you're right, you're on the right track there with your thoughts. Let me see if there are any further questions. Barry, we are working on all aspects of POPI. I've been for some while. Fantastic. So there is confirmation from the horse's mouth. Barry is, and I'm sure, you know, the head office is completely up to speed, and they're busy working on it. Luckily for us, as I said right at the beginning, we've got 10 months. We don't need to rush into any changes right now. We just need to start understanding the changes. We need to understand what is going to be expected, so that by June, July next year, when your Chaz Everett changes have already been circulated and there's been training done, that it's not a big surprise, that you actually understand it, and that it's a smooth transition into the new information compliance era.
There was just one other question from Margie Wagner, who wanted to know, what if we search in Lightstone?
So so Margie, I'm going to just share the screen again, because if we go back to the slideshow and we look at the definition of personal information, for which obviously we need client's consent to load it, to use it, to share it. Do you see property value on this list or in this definition? No. So Lightstone's information, which you get for a reason, you get information in a specific suburb or an area from Lightstone and CMA in order for you, for you to do a proper valuation, a desktop valuation, and for that you obviously need lots of comparative data, and you often supply that comparison and the comparative data to your prospective client to convince him to take on board your price counseling or your pricing. I know that that's how the valuations or the mandate presentation happens. You actually have the statistics printed and you show him the last 10 sales in that area, what the prices were, the price differential on a percentage. I know how that works. So property address is personal information. So when you draw the information from Lightstone CMA and you put it together in order to present to a prospective seller, when you present the mandate, you must describe the properties in terms of their deeds registry addresses. So not the physical address, because physical addresses is how people find you. But an IRF number, you're not going to know where IRF 123 Bedford View is. So if description of property that you draw on Lightstone and CMA, you do not need the owner's permission of that property. If in your comparative analysis, you describe the properties with their earth number and their section numbers. But you cannot put number 3 Amaryllis Road, Bedford View into your comparison because that is personal information for which you need the owner of that property's permission. So that is how you're going to do the analysis of where and what you need consent for. So the other information on CMA, which doesn't fall within personal information in this definition, is what? The value of the property. And that's the most important bit of comparative information that you draw. So you can describe the 10 properties that you want to show to your prospective seller. You can put their earth numbers down, and you can put their values down at which they sold. You can even put the date down that the sale was registered. You can even put the comparison down of the listing price and the sales price, because none of that is personal information and none of that requires the owners of those 10 properties consent, because none of that is defined as personal information. So there's no way in which you can identify the owner from an if description unless you have access, like I did, to the deeds office. Okay, and we can't just give out the information. So attorneys can't just do searches. So you can still continue to do your CMA and your Lightstone analysis. Next time, I'm going to show you what happens with information from CMA and Lightstone when clients ask you to remove the information, whatever the information is, whether it's property value or whether it's their name and surname. Because it is important that you and your service suppliers are in line. So CMA Lightstone, if you're using Lightstone, service level agreements with Lightstone need to be reviewed. Because if client asks you to remove, they must also remove it at Lightstone. So that's what we will be dealing with next time. I hope that answers your question. Okay, so I think, yeah, if there are any other questions, then you're more than welcome to email Vanessa, and she will make sure that either me or Anastasia or Richard or any of the other attorneys give you a satisfactory answer. But I think you'll get a lot of your answers on the practical side of things from session 2. And I'm quite excited about that session. I know you're going to absolutely love that session because I'm going to show you a lot more practical things and screenshots and how it looks out there already. And, you know, that's I'm very excited about that. So I think, yeah, I think that's the end of today, Barry. Thank you very much again for hosting us. We are very grateful for the opportunity. I'm not sure if Anastasia is logged in. I know she had an appointment. If not, then Vanessa and I thank you for your attendance and we will see you next time.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Mal. Thank you, guys. Have a wonderful afternoon.